Consent. The word was offered to me back in May, and it really was just offered to me as a word. As an Enneagram 8, here's a word, it's consent. And I'll link below the book that it comes from. I haven't read it, but I'm sure it's great. I love the author. And I started thinking, consent. Consent to people, consent to process, consent to potential weaknesses, consent to timing, and all of it made me want to throw up. And someone at the table was like, oh, it's like surrender. And I was like, no, surrender's fine. Consenting is evil. And at the same time, right, so that's May, I'm working my 12 steps. I'm thinking about the third step, and I'm going to make a decision to turn my will and my life over to the care of God as I understand Him. And I'm like, please, so easy. Only the first 3 steps. It's like flannel graph Jesus. I'm raised on that shit. Like, please, give me, where's the hard stuff, right? No big deal. God and I, I'll pass him a to-do list. He's got good ideas. He made grass. So he's very efficient. He can see pictures that I can't see. He can do stuff. And I'm all about working with that. That's great, right? In June, I meet with my spiritual director. Oh, look, story time. Story time, I love this. In June, I meet with my spiritual director, and we're talking and kind of doing some imaginative work, and I say it's a little bit like I'm in hospice, and I'm just sitting there, and God is holding my hand. And she's an Enneagram 8, and so I'm doing what people usually do with me in different sessions. Usually people don't do this with me during spiritual direction. They'll just do it when they come over to my house for dinner. Sobbing. Sobbing. And I'm thinking yeah, I love hospice care. I love being with people at the gateway. It's birth, hospice, I love it all. And so that's really a sweet thing for me. And I'm also simultaneously in that session just thinking about this giant wall of trauma that I am moving out of the way, and what a huge work it is. But primarily, as I'm sitting with God as I understand Him, I'm thinking about holding His hand and looking over at Him and going this sucks. This also sucks. Also, it sucks. And a real freedom just to say the thing, and just to say the thing over and over to Him, because, and I've seen this. That's just the way it is. This is the way it is. It's the way it is, and I want to be the way it is. So I'm noticing it's really great. It's it's a little bit magical how God is at work, and I like that, right? I'm noticing some movement there. I think it's really great. July spiritual direction comes up, and I'm yeah, it's really great. It's going good. No big deal. But the wall, this wall of trauma, I don't understand. We had just read The Critical Journey, and I don't know if you're familiar with that, but it's a book that kind of goes through the different seasons that people can be in as they relate to a spiritual higher power. All of them rich and good and beautiful and expansive, but all of them different. And so I was a little bit I know what it feels like for me to be running up against this wall, and I don't really understand why other people are talking about a wall, and it feels very, very different than what I'm experiencing. Tell me if you relate. People talk about hard stuff, and you're that is hard. That is very, very hard. Also, I am aware in my body and in my soul of another area of hardness that I have walked through that has taken me to places that this is not describing. Okay. So, I take a closer look at the wall, and I look up to my little sweet spiritual director who's just sitting there being so great and giving me all the space to have the process. And I go, I don't think it's me moving the wall. I think maybe God is moving the wall. And I've noticed that magical movement of the tool being there when I need it. I've noticed the encouragement when I couldn't take another thing. the sweetness and the goodness and like being useful when I actually am not useful. All the things that are good and feel, bring home the bacon when I can barely step out the door. All those sweet things that God has given me in this season. And so I do what maybe you could relate with. I get very angry and I think, get the fuck out of my way. Like, don't you fucking touch a single fucking thing, you are inept. And my spiritual director was like, yeah, great. Just like, let's see where that takes you. That's good. Talk to you next month. And I stay angry because fucking God gonna move my fucking wall of trauma. And I have some feelings like, why didn't you move the fucking wall 6 months ago? Why didn't you move it 10 years ago? All the things that come up for me. A day, I'll just keep saying the same things over to him. You're dumb. Basically, you're dumb. And you don't know what you're doing, and I'm going to get up out of this bed and like take care of the shit now. And then the next day I was like, oh, that's the third step. Like when they talk about making a decision to turn my will and my life over to God and consenting to that, consenting to surrender, that's what they're talking about. And it was gross. It was really, really gross. And I was still angry. But at least I'd had that like honest awareness of going like, oh, oh yeah, that third step, that's not quite as easy as I think. And consent it's still just as gross, and it's still just gonna be a step by step. I've been thinking lately about the spiritual practice of easy does it. And sit with that for a minute. It'll hit you later. It won't feel good. Part 2 of the video about consent is a request. Prepare yourselves. I want guinea pigs. I'm going into my 2nd year of spiritual direction school. And I want people who can sit with me once a month, 1 time, 100 times, whatever you're up for. And I can practice the process of spiritual direction with me. I am a little bit like a spiritual midwife. I am a midwife in real life, but in my spiritual direction practice, I'm a little bit like a midwife. You're doing the process. You're doing the work. But I could offer encouragement, perspective, honesty, empowerment. I can offer space to say true things and be with you as you go. It's something that I love being given, and it's something that I love to give. Hopefully this next sentence is uncomfortable and weeds out most of you. I'm really looking for people who can consent to a season of more God birthed into their lives. And I am not in any way someone who thinks that everyone gets to have a supernatural birth, where it's just like, boom, I was like laughing and dropped out a baby. I was just laughing. I just did a couple breaths and then boom, spirituality, expansiveness, awareness. It was all mine. That's not what typically happens. And I want to be there for that. I want to be there for the deep breath and the I can't and the why and what and where. Bless you in consenting. Bless you in consenting to the beloved as is. Bless you in being known. And bless you in being heard.